The autumn wind carried the smell of rain as Marcus Cole sat alone on the weathered bench at Jefferson Park. His hands trembled slightly as he held the folded American flag, the one they'd given him at his brother's funeral just 3 days ago. The tears came without warning, streaming down his face as the memories flooded back. Memories of growing up together in this very neighborhood, of joining the Navy together, of promises made and broken. Marcus was 42 years old, built like a man who had spent decades training for combat. His shoulders were broad, his arms thick with muscle, but none of that strength could protect him from the grief that consumed him now. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had taught him to suppress emotion, to compartmentalize pain, to push through any obstacle. But losing David, his younger brother, his best friend, his last remaining family, had shattered something inside him that he didn't know how to fix. The park was nearly empty on this grey Wednesday afternoon. A few pigeons pecked at crumbs near the fountain that hadn't worked in years. The playground equipment sat silent and rusted, a testament to a neighborhood that had seen better days. Marcus had returned to Cedar Heights 6 months ago, hoping to reconnect with David after years of deployment. Now David was gone, taken by a heart attack at 38, and Marcus was alone in a place that felt like a stranger. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, embarrassed even though no one was watching. Navy SEALs don't cry, that's what they always said. But here he was, a decorated veteran of countless operations, weeping on a park bench like a child. That's when he heard the footsteps, small, rapid, desperate. Mister, please!" Marcus looked up to see a girl running toward him. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, with dark braided hair and a pink jacket that was too thin for the October chill. Her eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her brown cheeks. She stopped in front of him, gasping for breath. "Please, you gotta help! They're hitting my mom! They won't stop!" Marcus's military training kicked in immediately. He stood up, tucking the flag inside his jacket. "Who's hitting your mom? Where?" "The men! The bad men who come to our house." The girl grabbed his hand, pulling him. "Please, mister, she's bleeding." "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Destiny. Destiny Williams." "Okay, Destiny, show me where you live, right now." They ran together through the park, across the broken sidewalks of Cedar Heights. Marcus had been trained to assess situations rapidly, to gather intelligence before engaging. As they ran, he asked questions. "How many men, Destiny?" "2, maybe 3. "I don't know, they come sometimes." "Do they have weapons?" "I don't know. Maybe. They hurt my mom before." "Where's your dad?" "He's gone. Been gone a long time." They turned onto Maple Street, a row of cramped townhouses with peeling paint and bars on the windows. Drug dealers stood on the corner, watching them pass with suspicious eyes. Marcus clocked them automatically. 3 young men, probably armed, definitely involved in something illegal. But they weren't his concern right now. "That one." Destiny pointed to a townhouse with a broken front step. "That's our house." Marcus could hear it before they reached the door, a woman crying, begging, and the unmistakable sound of flesh hitting flesh. His blood ran cold. In all his years of combat, in all the operations he'd conducted in hostile territories around the world, nothing ignited his rage like a man putting his hands on a woman. "Stay here," he told Destiny, positioning her behind a parked car. "Don't move until I come back for you. Understand? But my mom. I'm going to help your mom, but I need you safe first. Can you be brave for me?" Destiny nodded, her lip trembling. Marcus approached the front door. It was slightly ajar, the lock clearly broken. He could hear voices inside, 2 men at least. One was shouting about money, the other was laughing. He didn't knock. The door flew open with one powerful kick, and Marcus stepped into chaos. The living room was small and sparse, a worn couch, a television on a plastic crate, toys scattered across the floor. A woman lay curled on the ground near the kitchen doorway, her face bloodied, her arms raised to protect herself. Two men stood over her. The first was tall and skinny, with gold chains and a tattoo crawling up his neck. The second was shorter but heavily muscled, wearing a white tank top stained with what Marcus immediately recognized as blood. They both spun toward the door, their expressions shifting from surprise to anger in an instant. "Who the hell are you?" the tall one demanded. Marcus didn't answer. He was already moving. 20 years of combat training had hardened his body into a weapon. He closed the distance in 2 strides, driving his elbow into the tall man's solar plexus before he could react. The man doubled over, gasping, and Marcus grabbed the back of his head and brought it down hard onto his rising knee. The crack of cartilage was unmistakable. The tall man crumpled. The muscular one was faster than he looked. He swung a wild punch that Marcus ducked under, then another that grazed his shoulder. But the man was a street fighter, untrained and sloppy. Marcus caught his next punch, twisted the arm behind his back, and swept his legs out from under him. The man hit the floor face first, and Marcus kept him there with a knee between his shoulder blades. "You ever touch this woman again," Marcus said, his voice low and deadly calm, "and I will end you. Do you understand me?" The man was struggling, cursing, but Marcus increased the pressure until the struggling stopped. "I said, do you understand me?" Yeah, I understand. Get off me, man." Marcus looked at the woman. She had pushed herself up against the wall, staring at him with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Her lip was split, one eye already swelling shut, and there were bruises on her arms that told him this wasn't the first time. "Mom, are you able to move?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Your daughter is outside. She came to get help. I need you to go to her while I deal with these two." "Who are you?" "Someone who doesn't like seeing women get hurt. Go. Now." The woman, she couldn't have been more than 30, stumbled to her feet and made her way to the door. Marcus kept his knee on the muscular man until he heard the reunion outside, Destiny crying, her mother's voice soothing her. Only then did Marcus stand up. He grabbed both men by their collars and dragged them toward the door, tossing them onto the front steps like garbage. "Get out of this neighborhood," he said. "If I see either of you here again, if I hear you've been anywhere near this woman or her daughter, I will find you. And trust me, you don't want that." The tall man, still clutching his broken nose, glared at him with hatred. "You don't know who you're messing with. You just made a big mistake." "I've made plenty of mistakes in my life," Marcus replied. "Stopping 2 cowards from beating a defenseless woman isn't one of them. Now get out of my sight." They limped away, cursing and threatening, but Marcus had heard worse from men far more dangerous. He turned to find Destiny and her mother watching him from the sidewalk. Destiny's mother had her arm around her daughter, both of them crying. "Thank you," the woman whispered. "Thank you so much." "What's your name?" "Sharon. Sharon Williams." "Sharon, those men, are they going to come back?" She looked away, shame coloring her bruised face. "They always come back. My ex-husband owed them money for drugs. When he left, they said I had to pay." "How much?" "3,000. I've been paying what I can, but it's never enough. They keep adding interest, keep coming back." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Predators. The world was full of them, men who exploited the vulnerable, who built their power on the suffering of others. He'd fought them overseas for 2 decades. It seemed they were here too, in the very neighborhood where he'd grown up. "We're going to figure this out," he said. "But right now you need medical attention. Where's the nearest hospital?" "I can't afford a hospital. I don't have insurance." "There's a free clinic on Washington Street," Destiny piped up. "My friend Jalen's mom takes him there." Marcus nodded. "Then that's where we're going. Come on." He drove them in his truck, an old Ford he'd bought with some of his savings after leaving the service. Sharon sat in the passenger seat, holding a cloth to her bleeding lip, while Destiny rode in the back. The little girl kept staring at Marcus in the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with something that looked like hope. The clinic was crowded but efficient. Marcus sat in the waiting room with Destiny while Sharon was examined. The girl sat close to him, close enough that her shoulder touched his arm, as if she was afraid he might disappear. "Are you a police officer?" she asked. "No." "Then how did you beat those men up like that? They're scary. Everyone's scared of them." "I used to be in the Navy. They taught me how to protect people." "Like a superhero?" Marcus almost smiled. "No, sweetheart. Just a man who learned some skills. What's your name?" Marcus Cole. My mama says Cole was a family that used to live on our street before I was born." Marcus felt a strange sensation in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. "That was my family. I grew up in this neighborhood." Destiny's eyes went wide. "Really? You grew up here?" 30 years ago this place was different. There were block parties and cookouts. Everyone knew everyone. Mrs. Henderson used to make the best lemonade you ever tasted. There's a Mrs. Henderson on my street. She's really old and never comes outside. That might be the same one. Sharon emerged from the examination room an hour later. Her lip had been stitched, her eye examined, and she'd been given ice packs and pain medication. She looked exhausted but steadier than before. "They want me to file a police report," she said quietly as they walked to the truck. "You should. It won't matter. The police don't do anything in this neighborhood. They come, they take a report, and nothing changes. And if I do file something, Marcus and Dwayne, those are the guys. They'll make it worse. For me and for Destiny." Marcus opened the truck door for her. What if things could change? They can't. This neighborhood is what it is. Good people leave, bad people stay. That's just how it works. But Marcus wasn't listening to her words. He was remembering the Cedar Heights of his childhood. The Cedar Heights before the factories closed, before the drug trade moved in, before hope became a luxury no one could afford. He was remembering the day he left for basic training, how his mother had cried and told him to make her proud, how David had promised to look after things while he was gone. They pulled up in front of Sharon's townhouse. The front door was still open from when Marcus had kicked it in. "We'll need to fix that lock," he said. "Tonight I'll take care of it. You've done enough, more than enough. It's not enough until you and Destiny are safe." He looked at the street, the crumbling sidewalks, the overgrown yards, the houses that had been abandoned and boarded up. The drug dealers were still on the corner, eyeing his truck with open hostility. "This was a good neighborhood once," he said, more to himself than to Sharon. "It can be again. You can't fix this, Marcus. No one can." But Marcus Cole had spent 20 years being told things were impossible. He'd been told operations couldn't be done, targets couldn't be reached, teammates couldn't be saved. He'd proven those voices wrong more times than he could count. We'll see about that. The next morning, Marcus woke early in the small apartment he'd been renting since his brother's death. David's belongings surrounded him. Boxes he couldn't bring himself to unpack. Photographs he couldn't bear to look at. The grief was still there, heavy as an anchor, but something else had joined it overnight. Purpose. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. In his years as a SEAL, planning had been everything. You assessed the situation, identified the objectives, analyzed the resources, and built a strategy. This neighborhood was no different than a hostile territory. It had been overrun, its people terrorized, its systems broken. But it could be reclaimed. He wrote down names: Sharon Williams, Destiny, the two men, Marcus and Dwayne. He wrote down locations: the corner where the dealers stood, the abandoned houses, the broken streetlights. He wrote down resources: himself, his training, his savings. It wasn't much to start with, but it was something. His first stop was Mrs. Henderson's house. The old woman answered the door on the fourth knock, peering through a gap held secure by a chain. "Who's there? Mrs. Henderson? I'm Marcus Cole. Henry and Ruth Cole's son." The door closed, and for a moment he thought she wasn't going to let him in. Then he heard the chains slide, and the door opened to reveal a tiny woman in her 80s, her hair silver, her eyes sharp behind thick glasses. "Little Marcus, is that really you?" "Yes, Ma'am. Been a long time. 20 years at least. Come in, come in. Let me look at you." Her house was small but immaculate, filled with photographs and doilies and the smell of something baking. Marcus sat on her plastic-covered couch while she made tea, refusing all his offers to help. "I was sorry to hear about David," she said, handing him a delicate cup. "He was a good boy, came to check on me every Sunday until the day he passed." "I didn't know that." "There's a lot you don't know about your brother, I suspect. He was trying to make a difference here, Marcus, before it all fell apart." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Henderson sat in her armchair, her hands wrapped around her own cup. "David started a neighborhood watch about 5 years ago, got a dozen people involved at first. They patrolled the streets, reported suspicious activity, cleaned up the park. For a while, things got better." "What happened?" "The gangs didn't like it. They threatened people. Someone slashed David's tires. Someone else had their window broken. One by one, people dropped out, too scared to continue. David kept going as long as he could, but he was just one man." Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with sorrow. His brother had been fighting the same battle in his own way, while Marcus had been deployed overseas. And now David was gone, and his efforts had died with him. "Mrs. Henderson, I want to start again. What David was doing. I want to continue it, but I need to know who I can trust." The old woman studied him for a long moment. "You always were a determined boy, just like your father. Will you help me?" She smiled, and for a moment she looked decades younger. "Child, I've been waiting for someone to ask me that for years." Over the next week, Marcus met with the people Mrs. Henderson suggested. There was Earl Thompson, a retired postal worker who lived alone and spent his days watching the street from his front window. There was Rosa Gutierrez, a single mother of 3 who worked 2 jobs and somehow still found time to tend the only flower garden on the block. There was Pastor James from the small Baptist church on the corner of 5th and Madison, a man whose congregation had dwindled but whose faith had not. And there was Sharon and Destiny, who Marcus checked on every day. He'd fixed their door and installed new locks, then added a security bar for good measure. He'd taken Destiny to get ice cream while Sharon rested, and the little girl had chattered non-stop about school, about her friends, about her dreams of becoming a doctor someday. "You're good with her," Sharon said one evening when Marcus dropped Destiny off after taking her to the park. "She's easy to be good with, smart kid. She hasn't stopped talking about you. Mr. Marcus this, Mr. Marcus that. You've given her hope." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being anyone's hope. "Has there been any trouble?" "The men?" "No, but I know they'll be back. Marcus, the one with the tattoo, he runs things for someone bigger. A man named Jerome Price. They call him JP. He controls most of the drug trade in this area. Tell me about him." Sharon looked nervous. "I shouldn't. If he finds out I'm talking, he won't find out. Not from me." She was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. "JP grew up here just like you did, but he went a different way. Started dealing when he was 15, worked his way up. Now he has a whole organization, dozens of people who work for him. They control the corners, they shake down the businesses, they keep everyone scared. The police have tried to bring him down, but he's smart. He never gets his hands dirty himself." "Where does he operate from?" "He has a house on Oakland Avenue, the nice side of the neighborhood, where things haven't fallen apart yet. He lives there like he's some kind of king, while the rest of us struggle." Marcus filed the information away. JP would be a problem eventually, a big one. "But you didn't take down an organization by attacking its head first. You dismantled it piece by piece, cutting off resources, disrupting operations, building pressure until the whole structure collapsed." That Sunday, Marcus attended Pastor James's church for the first time. The congregation was small, maybe 20 people, most of them elderly. But the pastor's sermon was powerful, speaking of redemption and renewal, of communities rising from ashes. After the service, Marcus approached him. "Pastor, I need your help with something. I had a feeling you might. Mrs. Henderson told me you'd been asking questions. I want to organize the neighborhood, like my brother tried to do." Pastor James nodded slowly. David was a good man. His heart was in the right place, but he was fighting alone, and alone none of us can win. "I don't plan to be alone." "Then you're already doing better than he did." The pastor led Marcus to a small office in the back of the church. "What exactly do you have in mind?" "A neighborhood watch is a start, but it's not enough. We need to address the root causes, the abandoned properties that serve as drug dens, the lack of jobs, the broken infrastructure. We need to show people that things can change." "That's ambitious." "Ambitious is all I know how to be." Pastor James smiled. "You know, your mother used to say you were stubborn as a mule and twice as determined." "Sounds about right." "The church can host meetings. We have a basement that's not being used for much these days, and I know some people in the community who might be willing to get involved if they thought there was real leadership." That's exactly what I needed to hear. The first community meeting was held on a Tuesday evening. Marcus wasn't sure what to expect, maybe 10 people if they were lucky. Instead, 43 showed up. They packed into the church basement, sitting on folding chairs, standing against the walls, spilling out into the hallway. Word had spread. The story of how a stranger had stopped 2 of JP's men from beating Sharon Williams had traveled through the neighborhood like wildfire. People were curious, some hopeful, many skeptical. Marcus stood at the front of the room, more nervous than he'd been before any combat operation. Public speaking had never been his strength. But he thought of David, of the flag still tucked in his jacket, of the promise he'd silently made to continue his brother's work. "My name is Marcus Cole," he began. "Some of you might remember my family. We lived on Maple Street until I left to join the Navy. I served for 20 years, and then I came home. My brother David, some of you knew him. He passed away last week. At his funeral I realized something. I've spent my whole adult life protecting people in countries thousands of miles away. But I never did anything to protect the place I came from, the place that made me who I am." He paused, looking out at the faces watching him. He saw fear there and exhaustion, but also a flicker of something that might have been hope. "This neighborhood is sick," he continued. "We all know it. The drugs, the violence, the poverty, they've been eating away at us for years. Some of you have lost children to the streets. Some of you have lost jobs, lost homes, lost hope. And the people who caused this, the dealers, the gangs, the politicians who forgot about us, they want you to believe that nothing can change. They want you to stay scared, stay silent, stay in your houses while they take over our streets." His voice grew stronger. "But I've seen what happens when ordinary people decide they've had enough. I've seen villages in countries you've never heard of stand up to warlords with nothing but courage and each other. I've seen the impossible become possible because someone decided to try. And I'm telling you right now, what those people did, we can do too. Cedar Heights was a good neighborhood once. It can be again, but only if we fight for it. Together." The room was silent for a moment. Then Earl Thompson stood up, his arthritic knees cracking as he rose. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 62 years, he said. "I watched it go from the best place in the city to what it is now. I've been scared to go outside after dark for the past decade, but I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of watching my home rot. If this young man is willing to fight, then so am I." Rosa Gutierrez stood next. "My children deserve better than this. They deserve to play in the park without worrying about needles on the ground. They deserve to walk to school without seeing drug deals on the corner. I'm in. One by one, people stood. Not everyone. Some slipped out the back, too afraid or too cynical to believe things could change. But by the end of the night, Marcus had the names of 32 people who were committed to trying. The work began the next day. They started with the simplest things, picking up trash, reporting broken streetlights, clearing overgrown lots, small improvements that wouldn't draw too much attention but would start to shift the atmosphere. Marcus organized teams, assigned tasks, kept everything coordinated. Within 2 weeks, the change was visible. The park where Marcus had been crying on that first day had been cleaned up. The playground equipment, while still old, had been repaired. Someone had planted flowers around the broken fountain. Kids started coming back, cautiously at first, then in larger numbers. The dealers on the corner watched with suspicion, but didn't interfere. Marcus knew they were reporting back to JP, but he also knew that picking up trash wasn't enough of a provocation to warrant retaliation. Not yet. The second phase was more ambitious. Marcus reached out to a local news station, pitching them a story about a neighborhood trying to reclaim itself. A reporter came out, interviewed several residents, filmed the cleanup efforts. When the segment aired, it sparked a wave of interest from outside the community. A hardware store donated supplies. A local business owner offered to fund a summer job program for teenagers. The city, embarrassed by the attention, finally agreed to fix the streetlights that had been out for years. But success brought attention, and attention brought trouble. 3 weeks after the first community meeting, Marcus was walking home from the church when a black SUV pulled up beside him. 2 men stepped out, not the same ones from Sharon's house, but cut from the same cloth. Odd faces, expensive clothes, the casual arrogance of people who were used to being feared. "You Marcus Cole?" one of them asked. "Who's asking?" "Someone who wants to talk. Get in the car." "I don't think so." The man smiled, and it wasn't friendly, wasn't a request. Marcus evaluated the situation. 2 men, probably armed, an SUV with tinted windows, likely a driver inside, possibly more. He could take the 2 in front of him, but if there were others, it could get messy. And the last thing the neighborhood needed was violence in the streets, confirming everyone's fears. "Fine," he said. "Let's talk." The drive took them to Oakland Avenue, to a large house with a manicured lawn, an oasis of wealth in a desert of poverty. The contrast was obscene. Marcus was led inside, past expensive furniture and artwork that looked stolen, into a back room where a man sat behind a mahogany desk. Jerome Price, JP, was smaller than Marcus expected. Mid-40s, slim build, receding hairline. He wore a tailored suit and gold-rimmed glasses that made him look more like an accountant than a drug kingpin. But his eyes told a different story. They were cold, calculating, the eyes of a predator. "Marcus Cole," JP said, gesturing to a chair. "The Navy SEAL, the hero of Cedar Heights. Please, sit." Marcus sat, but didn't relax. "You know who I am. I make it my business to know everything that happens in my territory. Your little cleanup campaign has been impressive. You've got people believing things can change." He chuckled. "It's almost inspiring. What do you want?" "Straight to the point, I appreciate that." JP leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "I want to offer you a deal. You're clearly a capable man. You have leadership skills, organizational abilities, the respect of the community. Those are valuable assets. I could use someone like you." "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership. You want to improve the neighborhood. Fine, I can help with that. I have resources you can't imagine. Together, we could transform Cedar Heights into something beautiful. And in return, you stop encouraging people to call the police. You look the other way when my business requires it. And you use your influence to keep things peaceful." Marcus studied the man across from him. JP was smooth, reasonable, persuasive. He probably made this pitch to everyone he wanted to control, and it probably worked most of the time. "Let me make sure I understand," Marcus said slowly. "You want me to help you maintain your drug empire in exchange for making the neighborhood look nicer? I want us to coexist. I was born in Cedar Heights too, you know. I remember the block parties, the cookouts, just like you do. I don't want to see this place destroyed, but I also have a business to run. There's room for both." "No, there isn't." JP's pleasant expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "That's unfortunate. Your business is poison. It kills people, destroys families, keeps this community trapped in a cycle of poverty and violence. You can dress it up however you want, but that's what it is. You're being naive. This is just how things work. Remove me and someone else will take my place. At least I have standards. I don't allow violence against children or the elderly. I make sure the product is clean. I'm the best option this neighborhood has. You're a parasite, and I'm going to cut you out." The silence stretched between them. Then JP smiled, and it was the scariest thing Marcus had seen since his last firefight in Afghanistan. "I'm going to give you 1 week to reconsider, 1 week to think about what you're doing. Talk to the people who've crossed me before. Ask them how it ended. Then if you still want to play hero, we'll see how committed your neighbors really are when things get difficult." The ride back was silent. The SUV dropped Marcus at the same corner where they'd picked him up, and the two men watched him walk away without another word. Marcus didn't go home. Instead, he went to the church and found Pastor James in his office. "I just met Jerome Price," he said. The pastor's face went pale. "What happened?" "He offered me a deal. I refused. He gave me a week to change my mind." "Lord, have mercy." Pastor James sat down heavily. "Marcus, you don't know what you've done. JP doesn't make idle threats. When he says things will get difficult, he means people will get hurt. I know exactly what I've done, and I need you to call an emergency meeting tonight." The church basement was packed again, but the atmosphere was different this time. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Word had already spread. Marcus Cole had challenged JP. Everyone knew what that meant. Marcus stood at the front, same as before, but this time he didn't have a speech prepared. This time, he just had the truth. "I won't lie to you," he began. "What I did today was dangerous. I turned down a deal with Jerome Price, and now he's going to push back. He's going to try to intimidate us, to scare us into backing down. Things might get rough." "Then why did you do it?" someone shouted from the back. "Why poke the bear?" "Because the bear was always going to attack. Whether it's today or next month or next year, JP was never going to let us keep building something that threatened his power. All I did was make the timeline clear." "Easy for you to say. You don't have kids to worry about. You don't have a family they can threaten." Marcus nodded. "You're right. I don't. And I understand if some of you want to walk away. This isn't your fight to lose." "But it is," Sharon Williams said, standing up. Destiny was beside her, holding her hand. "It's all of our fight, because if we back down now, nothing changes, ever. They win, and we spend the rest of our lives living in fear." "I'm with Sharon," Earl Thompson said. "I'd rather die standing up than live another year on my knees." Rosa Gutierrez nodded. "My children need to see that there are people willing to fight for them. Even if it scares me, I can't teach them to give up." Marcus looked around the room. Some faces were terrified. Some were angry, some were resigned, but no one left. "Here's what we're going to do," he said. "We're going to keep doing exactly what we've been doing. Cleaning up, organizing, building community. But we're also going to prepare. I want neighborhood watch teams, patrolling in pairs, especially at night. I want everyone to have each other's phone numbers. If you see anything suspicious, you report it. Not just to the police, to each other." He turned to Pastor James. "Can the church serve as a safe house if needed?" "Absolutely. We have room for anyone who needs shelter." "Good. I'm also going to reach out to some people I know, former military, law enforcement contacts. We might need backup if things escalate. What about the police? Someone asked. Can't they do anything about JP? They've been trying for years. But JP is careful. He insulates himself from direct involvement. What we need is evidence, hard proof of his operations. And we might be the only ones positioned to get it. The meeting broke up late, with people clustered in small groups, planning and strategizing. Marcus felt a hand on his arm and turned to find Sharon looking at him with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I've been in worse situations." "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know. A month ago I was sitting in a park crying over my brother, feeling like my life had no purpose. Now I've got 40 people depending on me to keep them safe from a drug lord. It's a lot. David would be proud of you." "You think so?" "I know so. He talked about you sometimes. How his big brother was out there saving the world, and he was stuck here doing nothing important. But what he was doing was important, Marcus, just like what you're doing now." Marcus felt the grief surge up again, unexpected and overwhelming. He blinked hard, forcing it back. "I can't let him down," he said quietly. "Not again." Sharon reached out and took his hand. "You won't." The first attack came 3 days later. Marcus was asleep in his apartment when his phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Earl Thompson, his voice shaking with fear and anger. "They burned Rosa's garden, the whole thing, and they spray-painted something on her door." Marcus was dressed and out the door in 90 seconds. Rosa's flower garden, the only bright spot on the entire block, was destroyed. Charred stalks stood in the moonlight like skeletal fingers. On her front door, someone had spray-painted a message in red: "Back off or burn." Rosa stood on her porch, her 3 children huddled behind her, all of them crying. Neighbors were starting to gather, drawn by the smell of smoke and the sound of sirens as a fire truck arrived, too late to save anything. "They came out of nowhere," Rosa said, her voice hollow. "A car, no plates. They threw something on the garden and it just went up. Then they sprayed the door and drove away. My kids saw everything." Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but he forced it down. Rage was useful, but only when controlled. "Did you see their faces?" "No, they were wearing masks." Of course they were. JP was too smart to leave evidence. "You're going to stay at the church tonight," Marcus said. "You and the kids. Pastor James has room. I'm not leaving my home." "Rosa, this is my home, Marcus. My mother's home, and her mother's before that. I'm not going to let them drive me out." He understood. But he also knew that bravery and stubbornness weren't always the same thing. "Fine, but I'm staying too. On your couch, if you'll let me." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but just for tonight." It wasn't just for one night. Over the next week, Marcus barely slept, moving from house to house as the attacks continued. Someone slashed Earl Thompson's tires. Someone threw a brick through the window of a family that had been particularly active in the cleanup efforts. Someone left a dead rat on Pastor James's doorstep. None of it was enough to provoke a serious police response. None of it could be directly linked to JP. It was all designed to create fear, to show the neighborhood that resistance was futile. But something strange happened. Instead of backing down, people got angrier. "They think they can scare us with dead rats," Mrs. Henderson said at a hastily called meeting. "I survived Jim Crow. I marched with Dr. King. Some gangster in a fancy suit doesn't frighten me. My grandfather built this house with his own hands," a man named Thomas Jackson declared. "I'm not going to let some drug dealer run me out of it." "If they want a fight," Rosa Gutierrez said, her garden's ashes still visible outside, "then let's give them one." Marcus watched in amazement as the fear transformed into resolve. These weren't soldiers. They were teachers and retirees and single parents. They'd never been trained for conflict, but something had awakened in them, something that years of oppression hadn't been able to destroy. He thought of his brother again. David had tried to do this alone and had been broken by it. But David had planted seeds that Marcus was now watching grow. The turning point came unexpectedly. A week after the attacks began, Marcus received a phone call from an unknown number. "Mr. Cole? My name is Detective Angela Torres, Chicago PD Organized Crime Division. I think we should talk." They met at a diner outside the neighborhood where they wouldn't be seen. Detective Torres was in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that had seen too much. She ordered coffee and got straight to the point. "I've been trying to build a case against Jerome Price for 8 years. Every time I get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. Cases fall apart. The man has connections everywhere. Police, City Hall, even the federal courts. Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the first person in all those years who's actually gotten under his skin. Whatever you're doing in Cedar Heights, it's working. He's nervous. Nervous people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" Torres slid a folder across the table. "JP has a shipment coming in next week. Big one. Biggest in years. He's bringing it through the old Mitchell factory on the east side of your neighborhood. We've had surveillance on it, but we don't have enough for a warrant." Marcus opened the folder. Inside were photographs of the abandoned factory, along with documents showing ownership through a maze of shell companies. "What do you need from me?" "Eyes inside. Someone who can get close enough to document what's happening. If we can catch them in the act, with video evidence, we can finally take him down." "And you think I can do this?" Torres smiled, and there was something like respect in her expression. "I've read your service record, Mr. Cole. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq. Led some of the most successful special operations in recent military history. If anyone can do this, it's you." Marcus thought about it. The risk was enormous. If JP found out he was working with the police, the retaliation would be devastating, not just against him, but against everyone who had stood with him. But this might be the only chance they had to end this. "I'll do it," he said, "but I need something in return. Name it. Protection for my people. If this goes wrong, if JP figures out what we're doing, I need to know they'll be safe." Torres nodded slowly. "I can arrange for increased patrols. Unmarked units in the area. But I can't make guarantees, Mr. Cole. You know that." "I know, but do what you can." They shook hands, and Marcus left the diner with the folder tucked inside his jacket. He had work to do. The Mitchell factory had been abandoned for 15 years, a hulking corpse of brick and broken windows on the edge of Cedar Heights. In its heyday, it had employed hundreds of people from the neighborhood. Now it served as a monument to decline, and apparently as a distribution center for drugs. Marcus spent 3 days doing reconnaissance. He mapped entry and exit points, studied patrol patterns, identified the handful of guards who watched the property at night. His military training came flooding back. How to move without being seen, how to observe without being observed, how to wait with infinite patience for the right moment. He also reached out to some old contacts. A former SEAL teammate named Jackson, now working private security, drove up from Atlanta. A retired Army Ranger named Hernandez, who lived just an hour away, agreed to serve as backup. They weren't the full team Marcus would have wanted, but they were skilled and reliable. The shipment was scheduled for a Tuesday night. Marcus positioned himself on the roof of a building adjacent to the factory, with a clear line of sight to the loading dock. He had a video camera with a powerful zoom lens, a radio to communicate with his team, and a handgun that he hoped he wouldn't have to use. Torres had positioned her surveillance van 3 blocks away, receiving the video feed in real time. If everything went according to plan, they would have enough evidence by morning to arrest JP and dismantle his organization. The first trucks arrived at midnight. Marcus recorded everything, the trucks backing up to the loading dock, the crates being unloaded, the men with guns standing guard. He zoomed in on faces, on license plates, on the distinctive markings on the crates that would prove their contents. And then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Jerome Price himself stepped out of a black sedan, flanked by bodyguards. He was personally overseeing the shipment. This was unprecedented. Torres had said he never got his hands dirty. Something had changed. Marcus kept recording, his heart pounding. This was it. This was the evidence they needed. But JP wasn't just there to supervise. He was meeting someone. Another car pulled up, and a man stepped out. Marcus didn't recognize him at first. Then the man turned toward the light, and Marcus's stomach dropped. It was Lieutenant Michael Crawford, the commander of the police precinct that covered Cedar Heights. Marcus watched in horror as Crawford shook hands with JP as they talked and laughed like old friends. He understood now why every case against JP had fallen apart, why evidence had disappeared, why witnesses had recanted. The corruption went to the very top. He kept recording. After 20 minutes, Crawford got back in his car and drove away. JP stayed to oversee the rest of the shipment, which continued for another 2 hours. By the time the last truck pulled away, Marcus had enough footage to bring down not just a drug kingpin, but an entire corrupt system. He climbed down from his perch and made his way to the surveillance van. Torres was waiting for him, her face ashen. "You saw it too," Marcus said. She nodded. "Crawford, I suspected, but I never had proof. You have it now." Torres was quiet for a long moment. "This changes everything. If Crawford is involved, we can't go through normal channels. He'll be warned. The evidence will disappear." "Then what do we do?" "I have a contact in the FBI's public corruption unit. They've been looking at Crawford for other reasons. If I give them this footage, they can move quickly, before anyone has a chance to cover their tracks." "How quickly?" "Days, maybe a week. But in the meantime, we need to keep this quiet. If JP or Crawford find out what we have, they'll do anything to destroy it, and anyone who knows about it." Marcus thought of Sharon and Destiny, of Mrs. Henderson and Earl Thompson and Rosa Gutierrez, of all the people who had trusted him, who had followed him into this fight. "I understand," he said. The next few days were the hardest of Marcus's life. He had to act normal, had to continue the cleanup efforts and community meetings, while carrying a secret that could get everyone killed. Torres stayed in touch through encrypted channels, updating him on the FBI's progress. Meanwhile, JP seemed to sense that something was wrong. The attacks on the neighborhood stopped abruptly. Guards appeared outside his Oakland Avenue mansion. He was rarely seen in public. "He's scared," Jackson observed. "He knows something's coming." "Good," Marcus said. "Let him be scared." On Saturday morning, Marcus woke to the sound of someone pounding on his door. He grabbed his gun and approached carefully, but relaxed when he heard Destiny's voice. Mr. Marcus, you have to come." He opened the door to find the little girl in tears. "What is it? What happened?" "They took my mom. The men came and took her." Marcus's heart stopped. "When? Where?" "Just now. She went to the store and they grabbed her and put her in a car. I saw from the window." He grabbed his phone and dialed Torres. "JP has Sharon Williams. He's using her as leverage." "How does he know?" "I don't know, but we're out of time. Marcus, if you go after her, I'm going. Get the FBI to move. Now." He hung up and looked at Destiny. "I'm going to get your mom back. I need you to go to Pastor James's church and stay there until I come for you. Can you do that?" She nodded, her face streaked with tears. "Promise you'll bring her back." "I promise." He didn't know if he could keep that promise, but he was going to try. The ride to Oakland Avenue took 7 minutes. Marcus drove with focused calm, his mind running through scenarios, calculating odds, preparing for every possibility. He was outgunned, outmanned, walking into a trap. In any other situation, this would be suicide, but Sharon was in there, and he wasn't going to let her die. He didn't try to sneak in. Instead, he pulled his truck right up to JP's front gate and stepped out, hands visible. "I'm here to talk," he shouted. "Just talk." A long moment passed. Then the gate opened and two armed men escorted him inside. The house was even more opulent up close. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than every house in Cedar Heights combined. But Marcus barely noticed. His attention was on the man waiting for him in the living room. JP sat in an armchair, looking perfectly relaxed. Behind him, held by two guards, was Sharon. Her face was bruised again, and there was terror in her eyes, but she was alive. "Mr. Cole," JP said pleasantly, "I was hoping you'd come. Let her go. She has nothing to do with this. On the contrary, she has everything to do with this. You care about her, don't you? You and the girl. That's your weakness, Marcus. You collect people, and people can be used." Marcus forced his voice to stay calm. "What do you want?" "I want what I've always wanted, for you to stop. Disband your little neighborhood watch. Tell the people of Cedar Heights that you were wrong, that there's no point fighting. Do that, and Mrs. Williams goes home to her daughter. And if I don't," JP's smile didn't waver, "then I'll make an example of her, and then you, and then everyone who stood with you, one by one, until Cedar Heights learns its lesson." Marcus looked at Sharon. She was shaking her head, trying to tell him something. "Don't do it. Don't give in." "Here's the problem," Marcus said slowly. "Even if I wanted to do what you're asking, it wouldn't matter anymore. Things have been set in motion that neither of us can stop." Something flickered in JP's eyes. "What things?" "The FBI has been building a case against you and Lieutenant Crawford. They have video evidence of both of you at the Mitchell factory. By tomorrow morning, they're going to have warrants for your arrest." JP's composure cracked just for a moment. "You're lying. Check your phone. I'm sure Crawford is trying to reach you. He probably already knows." As if on cue, JP's phone buzzed on the table beside him. He glanced at it, and Marcus saw the fear flash across his face. "You think this changes anything?" JP snarled. "I have enough money and lawyers to tie up any case for years. And in the meantime, your organization will collapse. Your suppliers will find someone else. Your dealers will scatter. You'll spend every dollar you have on legal fees while your empire crumbles. And even if you beat the charges, you'll have nothing left to come back to." JP stood up, his mask of civility completely gone. "I'll kill you. I'll kill you and everyone you love." "You could try, but look around you. Look at your guards. They're already wondering if they should be here when the FBI shows up. Loyalty only lasts as long as the paychecks keep coming, and yours are about to stop." It was a gamble. Marcus could see JP's men glancing at each other, uncertainty in their eyes. These weren't soldiers willing to die for a cause. They were hired muscle, who worked for money and protection, both of which were about to disappear. "Let Sharon go," Marcus said. "Walk away. Whatever happens next, you don't want a hostage situation on top of everything else." JP stood frozen, his fists clenched. For a long, terrible moment, Marcus thought he had miscalculated. Then JP made a small gesture, and the guards released Sharon. She ran to Marcus, and he caught her in his arms, shielding her with his body as they backed toward the door. "This isn't over," JP said quietly. "Whatever happens, this isn't over." "Yes, it is." They made it outside to the truck, to the road. Marcus drove with one hand, his other arm around Sharon, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for pursuit. "How did you know?" Sharon asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How did you know he would let me go?" "I didn't. But men like JP are survivors above all else. When everything he's built is falling apart, his first instinct is to protect himself. Keeping you wasn't worth the risk. And if you'd been wrong?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't want to think about what he would have done if he'd been wrong. They went straight to the church, where Destiny was waiting with Pastor James. The reunion, mother and daughter embracing, both of them crying, was the most beautiful thing Marcus had seen in a long time. "Is it really over?" Pastor James asked quietly. "Not yet, but soon." The arrests came the next morning. FBI agents raided JP's mansion at dawn. They found drugs, weapons, and records that linked him to criminal operations across 3 states. Jerome Price was taken into custody without resistance, looking stunned and diminished in handcuffs. Lieutenant Crawford was arrested at his home an hour later. The footage from the Mitchell factory, combined with financial records that traced bribes and payoffs, was more than enough to secure an indictment. The news spread through Cedar Heights like wildfire. People gathered on corners and in front of stores, watching the coverage on their phones, unable to quite believe what they were seeing. "They got him," Earl Thompson said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "They actually got him." By noon, people were pouring into the streets. What started as disbelief transformed into celebration, a spontaneous block party that lasted until well past midnight. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years embraced each other. Children played in the street without fear, for the first time anyone could remember. Marcus stayed on the periphery watching. He wasn't much for celebrations, but Sharon found him in the crowd and took his hand. "You did this," she said. "All of this. We did it. All of us." "Don't be modest. It doesn't suit you." She smiled, and despite everything she'd been through, the smile reached her eyes. What happens now? Now, the real work begins. JP was a symptom, not the cause. The poverty, the lack of jobs, the broken infrastructure, none of that went away just because we arrested one drug dealer. But it's different now. People believe things can change. That matters. Marcus looked out at his neighbors, laughing, dancing, crying with joy. She was right. Something had shifted. The despair that had hung over Cedar Heights for so long had lifted, replaced by something fragile but real. Hope. "Yeah," he said softly. "It matters." 3 months later, the transformation was undeniable. The cleanup efforts had expanded beyond anything Marcus had imagined. What started as picking up trash had evolved into a full-scale neighborhood renovation. Volunteers from across the city came to help paint houses, repair roofs, and clear vacant lots. A local non-profit secured funding to rehabilitate abandoned properties, turning them into affordable housing. The Mitchell factory, once a symbol of decline, was being converted into a community center. Plans included a gymnasium, a computer lab, classrooms for adult education, and a medical clinic. The project had attracted attention from developers who saw Cedar Heights not as a lost cause, but as an opportunity. Pastor James's church had become the hub of neighborhood activity. The congregation had tripled in size, and the building now hosted everything from youth groups to job training programs. Mrs. Henderson, despite her age, had taken on the role of volunteer coordinator, managing dozens of helpers with military efficiency. Rosa Gutierrez had replanted her garden, bigger and more beautiful than before. She'd also started a neighborhood gardening program, transforming vacant lots into urban farms that provided fresh produce to residents who'd previously had access to nothing but convenience stores. Earl Thompson had become the head of the Neighborhood Watch, a role he took with utmost seriousness. The crime rate had dropped dramatically in the month since JP's arrest. Families were moving back into the area. Property values, while still modest, were climbing. And Sharon Williams, with Marcus's encouragement, had enrolled in community college to become a social worker. She was determined to spend her life helping others the way she had been helped. "You're really leaving?" Destiny asked one evening. She was sitting on the porch of her house watching Marcus load boxes into his truck. "Not leaving, just moving." "Where?" He pointed down the street to a small house that had been vacant for years. A fresh coat of paint gleamed in the evening light. I bought it, fixed it up, seemed like it was time to put down roots. Destiny's face split into a grin. "You're staying? Really? Really?" She jumped up and threw her arms around him. It still surprised him how easily affection came to this child who had seen so much hardship, but maybe that was the lesson, that love wasn't diminished by pain. If anything, it grew stronger. Sharon came out onto the porch, drying her hands on a dish towel. "I just heard from Detective Torres. The prosecution filed additional charges against JP today. They're saying he could get 40 years. Good. Crawford is cooperating, naming names in exchange for reduced sentence. Half the precinct is under investigation." Marcus nodded. He'd expected as much. Corruption that deep didn't exist in isolation. When you pulled one thread, the whole fabric unraveled. "The reporter from the Tribune called again," Sharon continued. "They want to do a follow-up story. About you." "I told them no. You should tell it, Marcus. People should know what you did. What we did, all of us." He finished loading the last box and closed the truck's tailgate. "I'm not a hero, Sharon. I'm just a guy who got tired of watching good people suffer. That's exactly what a hero is." He didn't have an answer for that, so he just shook his head and climbed into the truck. As he drove the 3 blocks to his new house, he passed Mrs. Henderson on her evening walk, Rosa watering her garden, Earl making his rounds with a flashlight and a walkie-talkie, his neighbors, his community, his home. Marcus had spent 20 years protecting people in countries far away. He'd never expected to find his purpose in the very place he'd tried so hard to escape, but life had a way of surprising you. He pulled into the driveway of his new house and sat for a moment, looking up at it. The house wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a small yard, a front porch that needed a swing, but it was his, and it was here, in Cedar Heights, where he belonged. His phone buzzed, a text from Sharon. "Sunday dinner. You're invited. Destiny is making dessert. No excuses." Marcus smiled, something he'd been doing more often lately. He texted back a simple, "I'll be there." He got out of the truck and started unloading boxes. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, a meeting about the community center, a training session for new neighborhood watch volunteers, a fundraiser to plan. The challenges weren't over. They would never be completely over. But for the first time in as long as he could remember, Marcus Cole was looking forward to the future. The park where it all started had been renamed. A small brass plaque near the new playground read, "David Cole Memorial Park," in honor of a man who never stopped believing in this community. Marcus visited it every morning during his run. Sometimes he sat on the bench, a new one, sturdy and freshly painted, and talked to his brother. Not out loud, not in any way that would make him look crazy, just in his head, the way he'd always talked to David, even when they were thousands of miles apart. "You should see it now," he said silently. "The kids playing, the families gathering. Old Mrs. Henderson sitting by the fountain that finally works. It's not perfect, nothing ever is, but it's getting there." He thought he could feel David's presence sometimes, in the breeze that rustled the trees or the laughter of children. He knew it wasn't real. Marcus Cole didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in legacy, in the idea that we live on through the things we leave behind and the people we touch. David's legacy was this neighborhood, this community that was slowly, painfully, beautifully being reborn. And now it was Marcus's legacy too. 6 months after that first community meeting, they held a ceremony to officially open the Cedar Heights Community Center. The old Mitchell factory, gutted and renovated, now gleamed with fresh paint and new windows. Over 500 people attended, neighbors, city officials, reporters, and community leaders from across the region. Marcus had been asked to give a speech. He'd written and rewritten it a dozen times, never satisfied. Public speaking still terrified him more than any combat operation ever had. But when he stood at the podium looking out at the crowd, the words came easier than he'd expected. 6 months ago, I was sitting alone in a park, wondering what my life was for. I'd spent 2 decades fighting for this country, and I'd come home to find that the neighborhood I grew up in, the place that made me who I am, had been torn apart. I thought there was nothing I could do about it. I thought it was too late. He paused, finding Sharon and Destiny in the front row. Destiny gave him a thumbs up, and he felt his throat tighten. Then a little girl ran up to me and asked for help. And in helping her, I found out something important, that one person can make a difference, but a community can move mountains. Everything you see here today, this building, the programs inside it, the hope you can feel in this room, none of it came from me. It came from you, from your courage, your perseverance, your refusal to give up on each other. He looked at Mrs. Henderson, sitting in the front row, in her Sunday best. At Earl Thompson, standing at attention, like he was back in his postal uniform. At Rosa Gutierrez, her children arranged beside her like proud soldiers. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that everything is fixed. It's not. There's still poverty in this neighborhood, still unemployment, still families struggling to make ends meet, but there's also something else now. There's belief. Belief that things can get better. Belief that we can shape our own future. That's what this building represents, not an ending, but a beginning. He stepped back from the podium, and the crowd erupted into applause. Destiny ran up to give him a hug, and Sharon followed, and then there were others, Earl and Rosa and Pastor James and Mrs. Henderson, all of them surrounding him, all of them part of this moment. Later, after the ceremony, Marcus found himself alone in the building's main hall. The guests had gone, the chairs had been folded and stacked, and silence filled the space. He walked to a window and looked out at the neighborhood. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across streets that no longer felt dangerous. He could see the park from here, the playground full of children. He could see Rosa's garden and Earl's patrol route and the steeple of Pastor James's church. He could see home. A year passed, then 2, then 5. Cedar Heights continued to transform. The community center expanded, adding a small business incubator that helped local entrepreneurs start their own companies. The crime rate dropped to its lowest level in 4 decades. Property values increased, but a community land trust ensured that long-time residents weren't priced out of their homes. Marcus stayed, as he'd promised. He became the community center's director, a job he'd never imagined wanting, but found deeply fulfilling. He mentored young people from the neighborhood, sharing not just his military skills, but the lessons he'd learned about resilience, perseverance, and the importance of standing together. Sharon finished her degree and became a social worker, specializing in helping families escape domestic violence. She and Marcus grew closer over the years, their relationship deepening into something neither of them had expected. Destiny graduated high school with honors and received a full scholarship to study pre-med at Northwestern. On the day she left for college, Marcus drove her to campus, both of them trying not to cry. "You know this is your fault, right?" she said as they unloaded her boxes. "What is?" "All of it. Me becoming a doctor, Mom going back to school, the whole neighborhood changing." She hugged him tightly. "You saved us, Mr. Marcus. You saved all of us. You saved yourselves." "I just opened the door. That's what you always say. It's still not true." He watched her walk into her dormitory, a confident young woman where a frightened little girl had once stood. And he thought about that afternoon in the park, when everything had changed. Grief had brought him to that bench, despair had kept him there, but a child's cry for help had lifted him up and set him on a path he never could have imagined. He drove back to Cedar Heights with the windows down, the autumn air cool against his face. The trees were changing colors, just like they had on that day 5 years ago. The neighborhood was different now, thriving where it had once been dying. But the seasons remained the same. He parked in front of his house and sat for a moment looking at the street where he'd grown up. Mrs. Henderson was out on her porch, waving at passing neighbors. Earl Thompson was fixing a fence 2 doors down. The smell of Rosa's cooking drifted from her open kitchen window. Marcus thought of his brother, buried now in the cemetery at the edge of town. He thought of his parents, gone even longer. He thought of all the people he'd lost over the years, teammates in combat, friends to age and illness, family to time and circumstance. But he also thought of everyone he'd gained, Sharon and Destiny, Mrs. Henderson and Earl and Rosa, Pastor James and Detective Torres, and the hundreds of neighbors who had become family. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but it wasn't alone anymore. It lived alongside hope, alongside purpose, alongside love. Marcus Cole got out of his truck and walked into his home. There was dinner to prepare. Sharon was coming over and he'd promised to cook. There was work to do tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. And for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he wanted to be. The following spring, the neighborhood held its first annual Cedar Heights Festival. The streets were blocked off for food vendors and craft booths and games for children. A stage in the park hosted local musicians and speeches from community leaders. Marcus had been asked to speak again. He'd tried to refuse, but Sharon had insisted. "You're the reason this is happening. You have to say something." "I've said everything I have to say." "Then say it again. These people need to hear it." So he stood on the stage, looking out at a crowd even larger than the one at the community center opening. He saw old faces and new ones, long-time residents and families who had recently moved in. He saw hope. "5 years ago," he began, "I came back to this neighborhood broken. I'd lost my brother, I'd lost my direction, and I'd lost my faith in the future. I thought I was coming home to die. Instead, I found something worth living for." He paused, memories washing over him. "This community taught me that the most important battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with patience, with persistence, with the simple act of showing up day after day and refusing to give up. They're fought by people like you, teachers and parents, retirees and teenagers, people who have every reason to despair but choose to hope instead." He looked at Sharon, standing at the edge of the crowd with tears in her eyes. "Someone asked me recently what I'm most proud of. And I thought about all the operations I conducted in the military, all the missions accomplished and objectives secured. But none of that compares to this, to looking out at this crowd and knowing that every single one of you played a part in building something beautiful out of something that was broken." The applause started before he finished, building and building until it felt like thunder. Marcus stepped back from the microphone, overwhelmed. Sharon was there suddenly, her arms around him. "That was perfect," she whispered. "I didn't even finish." "You didn't have to. They know." Later that night, after the festival had wound down and the streets were quiet again, Marcus walked through the neighborhood one last time. The streetlights worked now. The sidewalks were clean. The houses, while still modest, no longer looked abandoned and hopeless. He ended up at David Cole Memorial Park, as he often did. The bench was empty, waiting for him. He sat down and looked up at the stars. "We did it, brother," he said quietly. "I know it's not everything you dreamed of, but it's a start. It's a good start." The wind rustled through the trees, and Marcus smiled. He stayed there for a long time, thinking about the past and the future, about loss and redemption, about the strange and unpredictable ways that life could change direction. He thought about a little girl in a pink jacket running toward a crying stranger with terror in her eyes and hope in her heart. He thought about second chances. When he finally stood to leave, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. A new day was coming to Cedar Heights, as it did every morning, full of challenges and possibilities, problems and solutions, ordinary moments and extraordinary ones. Marcus Cole walked home through the awakening neighborhood, past the houses and the gardens and the streets that had become his world. He was tired but content, worn but whole. He was exactly where he was supposed to be, and that made all the difference.